Yes, so I'm Mahesh Karnani. I'm a group leader here at the VU, and I'm also a manager, among other managers, of this PCI Neuroscience, or peer community in neuroscience, where, as Lena said, we organize a community to peer review transparently preprints in neuroscience. And it's part of the larger peer community in organization, which organizes many of these communities for free, run by researchers to do peer review of preprints. So let me start by telling you a little bit more about the background, about why we need PCI. So the traditional journal publication system is facing several problems. And one of them is about the quality of the science. So there is a big reproducibility crisis at the moment. Only about 20 to 60% of studies in journals are, 20 to 60% are non-reproducible. This has been published in several studies so far. And there's a publication bias toward only positive results because of the incentive structures that journals have, which then leads to harking, for example, drawing the bullseye where the shots are hitting. The methods are not clear and often not available, and data tends to not be available, which also hampers the reproducibility of studies or even judging whether they are so. The system is also inefficient. And it is not transparent. So as we all know from doing research, there's often a long multi-year cascade of submissions and rejections to different journals, and reviews get done by successive journals, and they're not shared in between. So there's a lot of wasted evaluation in addition to wasted time before we get to share the results with the field. Also, the reviews in many journals are quite invisible, so things happen in a black box, and editorial decisions are also invisible. They can be very difficult to understand sometimes, and some of the editors are basically unknown to your field as a researcher, which can be difficult. How do you trust the decisions that are being made in a black box by people who aren't necessarily from your particular field of research? So there's an argument that researchers who are active in a particular field might be better placed to make the final decisions of what is shared. And also, reviewing is now done by fewer people all the time. So as the volume of publications are increasing, more and more reviewers are needed. However, less reviewers are accepting invitations to review. Apparently about 20% of scientists are currently performing up to 95% of all peer reviews. And this concentration of sort of decision-making in a few people is not so good for science. And so there's also a lack of visibility and lack of recognition of doing peer review, which may contribute to this negligence of reviewing activities. The current publication system is still about 50% completely closed, so behind paywalls, and less than 50% is open access. And this is a massive equality issue because researchers from perhaps less well-funded institutions around the world cannot sometimes access the literature. So how can they contribute to the research if they cannot pay for it? And of course, the system is very costly, and there's an excellent profit margin for the journals, but this may not be so good for the science. So worldwide, about 10 billion a year is put into the publication system, forming an article cost of about 3,000 per article. And the publishers have very large profit margins compared to other leading companies. They tend to be very, very big. And this cost of publications, cost of publishing research, that's also a huge equality issue because, again, researchers from poorer institutions, there's another barrier for them to even contribute findings that they have. And so they must seek cheaper alternatives. And of course, this system arises from the fantastic business model that they're using at the moment, where libraries pay for subscriptions to the journals, And laboratories such as mine who make results, they pay the article processing charges to get the publications out. And there's even a third time we're charged by our time. So of course, researchers are the ones who evaluate, edit and proofread and even format these articles these days. So there's three steps of paying for the exact same product. Now, preprints are a part of the solutions to many of these issues, and that's because they are very low cost, oftentimes completely free to authors and readers. They're available immediately. There's versions and proof of anteriority. But preprints, although they're very good and they're taking off massively in the biomedical sciences at the moment, they have a quality problem. So they are simply preprints out there on servers, and they haven't been peer reviewed. And there can be very big diversity in the quality of preprints. So this is where PCI comes in, and this is why we need preprint evaluation. So the aim of PCI is to form these communities of researchers who evaluate and recommend preprints which are very good in their fields. And we do this by looking at preprints from servers like OSF, Zenodo, bioRxiv, etc. Those preprints then can be submitted by the authors to a PCI in their field, for example, in ecology, evolutionary biology, and PCI neuroscience, which I'm involved in. And so how does this work then, the workflow? So an author would start by making a preprint, putting it on the repositories such as OSF, for example. Also adding data and scripts in an open repository, such as Zenodo, for example. There are many alternatives. And after this, the author would then simply submit the link to this work to the website of PCI. And this is where our workflow starts. So then one of our recommenders in PCI Neuroscience, we currently have about 60 recommenders, and we're actively looking for new people to join as recommenders who act as basically editors of a journal. So they will pick it up when they're interested in a preprint, and then the recommender will handle the peer review of the manuscript by inviting external and internal reviewers to look at the manuscript. There will then be perhaps a few rounds of revision and peer review where the authors post new versions on the preprint server and they're reviewed. And hopefully at the end of it, there is a final approved version through this process, which then is the recommended preprint. And in this case, also, the recommender will then write a recommendation piece on the PCI website. And in this piece, the recommender explains why they think this preprint is very good. So this sort of becomes our publication policy within PCI. Instead of having a blanket policy like the journals have, which can be very, very vague and hard to follow sometimes, we have it on an individual basis for every accepted manuscript. So what does this look like then in practice? An example of a recent preprint that was recommended in PCI Neuroscience looks like this. So in the final version, the authors put it on a layout of PCI, our template, and they put this on archive, I think they were using in this case. And then here's an example of the recommendation text, which is completely transparent and publicly accessible on our website to anybody. The recommender in this case wrote a nice piece explaining the research, saying why it's so good, and we verified that there's open access, open peer review, open data, and open code in this instance. So the fate then after this process of preprints, they can continue through the journal system, for example. We know, of course, that all of us need evaluation points. We need to impress the judges that judge whether we get tenure and new jobs. So the journal system is certainly very, very useful still. And after the PCI process, an author can choose to immediately publish their work in the peer community journal, which launched recently a few months ago, which is also run by PCI. Or they can put it into a PCI-friendly journal, or they can put it into any other journal, depending on which one will be up for it. Just to mention the peer community journal, it looks like this. So we have a web page. It launched in November. It accepts all the articles as is if the authors want it. It's free for readers, it's free for authors, so there's no charges here. And everything's public, and this is what the layout looks like, for example, for this article we were looking at here. So the consequences of this PCI system then, and how they address these issues that we were discussing. This constitutes a big saving for research agencies. So the average cost that we need to figure out internally within PCI from grant sources is about 150 euros per paper instead of the 3,000 euro average in journal systems. The results are accessible immediately because it's based on preprints. So it's really a symbiosis with preprint servers. There's transparency of all the data and the methods, evaluations and the discussions. As I said, the editorial policy is replaced by a clear and argued recommendation text. These evaluations are portable, so authors can take them with them, and they can take their recommended preprint to any journal they wish. With this PCI system, we redistribute the responsibility to a community rather than these for-profit publishers where perhaps the editor may have a different priority than researchers. How are we doing at the moment? So PCI currently has 14 peer communities. We're getting a appreciable volume of submissions. There's been many recommendations so far. We're active on Twitter. We have many registered users, more than 1,000 recommenders across the PCIs. Our management is also distributed within the community and works on a rolling basis. So we're running a very, very democratic system where we try to redistribute the responsibility back into the researcher community for publications. And PCI has received support and awards from numerous institutions. And if I can just briefly tell you that we've got an award. Currently, our funding is mostly coming from the French Open Science Fund, from a big award, as well as from a Liber award. We're also supported financially by some scientific societies and also some research institutions and universities. And here I'm proud to announce that VU, Open Science Office, shares our vision and has joined us the first Dutch university to support PCI. So we're very grateful for that, and we're happy to get these opportunities to talk with the community here in the Netherlands. We also have many libraries and other supporters. I'm just showing this to note that how international this is. So all around the world, institutions are supporting this form of publishing science. And we're also recognized by many doctoral schools. This is important particularly, and I'll end with this, because if we get the doctoral schools to recognize PCI and the research products that arise from this, then we get the evaluation committees on our side as well, and we can sort of go for the holy grail in launching these new platforms, which is to get it recognized and get it evaluated by the institutions who make decisions currently mostly based on impact factor points for who gets one and what in their careers. So a Finnish julkaisufoorumi is recognizing works done in PCI evolutionary biology as publications, and in France, a number of grant committees are also judging these as actual papers. So this is a great start, and this is where we might need your help and ideas to better integrate this into VU, perhaps, as an example. So if you'd like to participate in PCI, I would encourage everybody to submit articles, spread the word about PCI, give us your contacts so that we can inquire about getting more support and recognition, and to really drive this to be a mainstream form of sharing results and discussing science. And please do register on our PCI websites in your field. And if there isn't a PCI in your field, please consider starting one through a process with the PCI organization. It's all free, transparent, and very worthwhile activity. So thanks very much for listening.